the aristocracy had a rule. If Queen Mary was visiting, hide anything you treasured. For decades, that was the joke. But here is the part no one tells you. Had she not been exactly that determined, that relentless, that impossible to refuse, a Romanov tiara would have stayed hidden in a burning palace, a family's emeralds would have been reset for a mistress, and 3 Fabergé eggs would have disappeared into Soviet hands forever. She didn't just collect jewels, she collected history before history had a chance to lose it. Before we begin, please support my channel by clicking on the like and subscribe buttons. Thank you. You might have caught a nod to this reputation in the recent Downton Abbey film, where a household nervously notices a few small items vanishing during a 1927 royal visit. For decades, a whisper circulated that the Queen would admire a choice object in a stately home and make it abundantly clear she expected it as a gift. London antique dealers often complained about her intense pressure to part with pieces. True kleptomania involves an uncontrollable urge to take random, often useless things. Queen Mary operated with the precision of a highly focused curator, zeroing in on antiques, jewels, and figurines with a very specific agenda. The contrast in her spending habits is fascinating. She was known for strict personal frugality, frequently choosing inexpensive gifts and carefully economizing on household expenses. Yet, her acquisitions for the royal collection were vast and uncompromising. Following the 1917 Russian Revolution, she purchased examples of Carl Fabergé's work, including 3 of his famous imperial eggs. She quietly donated thousands of pounds to save the Royal School of Needlework from bankruptcy and devoted immense attention to overseeing the creation of Queen Mary's doll's house. Beyond the grand purchases, there's a very practical detail that casts doubt on the image of the Queen quietly sweeping trinkets off drawing room tables. Marion Crawford, the governess to the future Queen Elizabeth II, observed that Queen Mary did not even carry a handbag during her royal visits. The physical logistics of smuggling stolen antiques out of country houses under the watchful eyes of her entourage simply do not add up. I often wonder if this intense drive to collect and protect was rooted in her early years. Born Princess Mary of Teck, she grew up in a family constantly plagued by severe debt, to the point where her parents had to move to Italy just to escape their creditors. It seems quite possible that watching her family's material security slip away left a lasting mark. Perhaps, upon finally reaching the throne, she saw securing the royal collection as a way to build a fortress against that kind of instability. I would love to hear your perspective in the comments on how much her childhood might have shaped these habits. Her gaze was fixed firmly on securing the royal legacy. The first major threat to that legacy, however, would come directly from her own brother and a box of the family's most precious emeralds. The story of the Cambridge emeralds begins with a simple lottery ticket. In 1818, King George III's 7th son, Prince Adolphus, Duke of Cambridge, married Princess Augusta of Hesse Castle. The newlywed Duke and Duchess settled in Hanover, where Adolphus served as viceroy. During a visit to her native Hesse, Princess Augusta decided to participate in a state-sponsored charity lottery held in Frankfurt. She ended up winning a small box containing about 40 graduated cabochon emeralds. When she later moved to England, the Duchess took the stones to a local jeweler and had some of them made into a pair of drop earrings and a necklace featuring 5 emerald pendants. The jewels gradually passed down the family line. We even have a wonderful detail from the journal of her daughter, Princess Mary Adelaide, Duchess of Teck. On a February afternoon in 1857, she wrote about reading with her mother until 2 o'clock, looking through her jewelry box, and receiving the emerald necklace as a gift. The Duchess of Teck later inherited the remaining loose emeralds and decided to elevate her existing jewelry. She owned an elaborate diamond stomacher made by Gerard, worn pinned across the bodice of her formal gowns. She incorporated 2 of the loose Cambridge emeralds into this piece, placing one emerald right in the center of the diamond lattice and suspending another from the bottom as a pendant drop. There is a well-known portrait of her from 1893, the same year her daughter Mary married the future King George V, where she is wearing the necklace, the earrings, and this exact stomacher. It looks like a secure royal legacy, firmly anchored in the family collection. But jewels occasionally end up with those who struggle to appreciate their weight. When the Duchess of Teck passed away in 1897, her jewelry was divided among her children. The emeralds did not go to her only daughter, the future Queen Mary. They were inherited by her second son, Prince Francis of Teck. Frank, as the family called him, was known as an engaging idler and a spendthrift with a serious gambling habit. Prince Francis enjoyed the ownership of his mother's emeralds until his unexpected death in October 1910. When his estate was assessed, its gross value was over £23,000, but his net personal cash amounted to just £670. The real shock to the family came when his will was read. He bequeathed the historic Cambridge emeralds directly to his married mistress, Eleanor Constance, Countess of Kilmorey. For over a century, the exact details of this arrangement were kept entirely private, sealed away from public view. The will was finally unsealed in 2024, revealing draft notes that Frank made at his solicitor's office back in January 1902. In them, he clearly instructed that his emeralds, pearls, and all the jewelry he inherited from his mother should go to a woman he referred to as COX, Lady Kilmorey. He even added a note expressing his hope that she would have the emeralds reset to suit her own tastes. The British monarchy kept those specific words hidden for 100 years. One can only guess how Queen Mary felt upon discovering that her family's heritage was heading straight into the jewelry box of her brother's mistress. She handled the situation quietly. There was no public scandal and no open confrontation. Using her brothers, Prince Adolphus and Prince Alexander, as intermediaries, Queen Mary approached Lady Kilmorey with a straightforward offer. She purchased the emeralds back for £10,000, an enormous sum at the time, but a necessary expense to reclaim her family's history. Lady Kilmorey accepted the money, and the stones were safely returned to the royal collection. Once Queen Mary had the emeralds in her possession, she did not simply leave them in a vault. Ahead of the 1911 Delhi Durbar, the grand coronation celebration in India, she commissioned Gerard to create a completely new suite of jewelry. The jewelers took the Cambridge emeralds and set them alongside the legendary Cullinan diamonds to form an extensive parure. This included a tiara originally topped with 10 pear-shaped emeralds, a necklace featuring 9 emeralds, a new stomacher holding 7, and a pair of earrings. However, amidst all this dismantling and modernizing, she chose to preserve a small piece of her mother's original design. The diamond and emerald cluster and the emerald drop from Mary Adelaide's stomacher were retained in their 19th century settings. They were simply linked together to create the Cambridge Emerald Cluster brooch. The piece features a large, faceted oval emerald surrounded by delicate gold filigree work and a halo of brilliant diamonds. From the early 1950s, this brooch rested in the jewelry box of Queen Elizabeth II, who liked to wear it both with and without its pendant drop. King Charles III inherited the brooch in 2022, and Queen Camilla made her public debut in the jewel during the Royal Ascot meeting in June 2025. Pinning the bright green emeralds to her coat, she brought the stones back into the daylight. The emeralds were safely home. Yet Queen Mary could not have known that these very same green cabochons would eventually be used to revive a damaged tiara smuggled out of a burning empire. We will get to that story shortly. Queen Mary's effort to reassemble her mother's jewelry box did not stop with those green cabochons. She was equally focused on tracking down the diamonds that belonged to Princess Mary Adelaide, Duchess of Teck. Her mother had inherited a collection of stones from her aunt, Princess Mary, Duchess of Gloucester, following her death in 1857. Among them was a diamond bandeau and 3 diamond roses, which were eventually incorporated into a highly distinctive headpiece, the Teck Crescent Tiara. The design features 3 wild diamond roses, separated by 20 diamond crescents, resting on a slim band of diamonds. The crescents on the tiara were constructed so they could actually be worn facing either backwards or forwards, offering a bit of versatility. Mary Adelaide wore it frequently for court events, sometimes adding 2 extra rows of diamonds at the base for additional height. She often paired the crescent tiara with the Teck diamond hoop necklace. Created in the 1860s, this piece consists of 22 diamond hoops set in silver and gold, each framing a central collet diamond. When the Duchess of Teck died in 1897, these particular diamonds bypassed Queen Mary and were inherited by her eldest brother, Prince Adolphus. His wife, Margaret, the Marchioness of Cambridge, was photographed wearing the crescent tiara and the hoop necklace together, stacked with a lattice-style choker, for the coronation of King George V in 1911. The exact chain of inheritance is a little sketchy, but by the 1930s, Queen Mary had managed to acquire both the crescent tiara and the hoop necklace from her brother's family. Interestingly, there are no known photographs of Queen Mary actually wearing either piece herself. Instead, she passed them directly to her daughter-in-law, Queen Elizabeth, the future Queen Mother. Elizabeth found a rather clever use for the diamond hoops. Instead of wearing the piece as a necklace, she had it set onto a wire frame and used it as a low-profile tiara. She wore it in exactly this way for the grand reopening of the Royal Opera House at Covent Garden in February 1946, pairing it with a 3-row pearl necklace. But not all of the Teck family jewels came back into Queen Mary's hands quite so easily. We have to return for a moment to Prince Francis and his mistress, Eleanor Constance, Countess of Kilmorey. While she had accepted £10,000 in exchange for the Cambridge emeralds, Lady Kilmorey flatly refused to give up everything she had been bequeathed. She held firmly onto another piece of royal history, the Teck Emperor of Austria brooch. This piece is formed as a plated gold circle with a pearl center and 12 brilliant cut diamonds in cut-down collet settings around the edge. It suspends a delicate collet chain and 3 detachable Baroque pearl pendants. The jewel held deep historical significance for the Teck family. It was given to Prince Francis in 1870 by Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria-Hungary. The emperor served as the baby's godfather, a connection established because the baby's father, the Duke of Teck, had previously been educated at an Austrian military academy and served in the Imperial Austrian Army. When Frank's will was finally unsealed, it confirmed he had left the piece directly to Lady Kilmorey, explicitly describing it as the jewel given to him by his godfather. She kept it for the rest of her life. Her own will dictates the next chapter of the brooch's journey. She stipulated that upon her death, the jewel was to be given to Princess Victoria of the United Kingdom, the daughter of King Edward VII and Queen Mary's own sister-in-law. Queen Mary had to wait decades before this brooch, having made a full circle through the hands of a mistress and a sister-in-law, finally returned to her collection. It takes an incredible amount of patience to be a royal collector. The brooch was eventually passed to Queen Elizabeth II in 1953. It famously appeared in the first official photographs of her 4th child, Prince Edward, taken by Cecil Beaton in the music room at Buckingham Palace in 1964. She continued to wear this grand piece for major state banquets well into the 21st century, keeping it safely within the royal collection, far removed from the tense negotiations of its past. While Queen Mary was dealing with the discreet purchase of her family's emeralds, a far more dangerous crisis was unfolding across Europe. The grand courts of the Russian Empire were collapsing, and with them, some of the most extraordinary jewelry collections in the world. Among the most prominent figures of the Russian imperial court was Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, known to her family as Mihin. Following her marriage to Grand Duke Vladimir in 1874, the Russian court jeweler Bolin created an elaborate tiara for her. It was constructed of interlocking diamond circles set in gold and silver, suspending delicate pear-shaped pearls. The piece was cleverly designed to be flexible. The pearls could be removed, and part of the diamond structure could be closed to form a smaller coronet. The Grand Duchess wore it constantly as the leading society hostess of St. Petersburg. She even wore it at a family wedding in 1896, standing right beside the future Queen Mary. But at the outbreak of the First World War, the Grand Duchess put her jewels away. When the February Revolution of 1917 forced her to flee St. Petersburg for a villa in Kislovodsk, her jewelry remained locked inside a hidden safe in her bedroom at the Vladimir Palace. Only a short time earlier, This tiara had been catching the light of palace chandeliers at the grand assemblies of the nobility, and now it sat in total darkness while an empire crumbled in the streets outside. It easily could have been lost forever. By that summer, the Grand Duchess was placed under house arrest, and her financial situation grew precarious. Her son, Grand Duke Boris, and an aristocratic British art dealer named Bertie Stopford hatched a highly risky plan to retrieve her property. Stopford, who had diplomatic ties, disguised himself alongside the Grand Duke as workmen. With the help of a palace caretaker, they sneaked into the Vladimir Palace and emptied the contents of the secret safe. The tiara and other jewels were packed into a pair of plain leather Gladstone bags. Stopford successfully smuggled the bags out of Russia and deposited them in a safety box in London. Maria Pavlovna herself became the last Romanov Grand Duchess to escape Russia, boarding an Italian steamer in February 1920. She died in France only a few months later. You might reasonably wonder what condition a delicate 19th century tiara was in after being smuggled across a continent in a leather bag. When Gerard finally conducted a formal inventory of the Grand Duchess's jewels in early 1920, they found the piece had sustained serious damage. During the journey, several of the pearls and diamonds had broken off and gone missing. The damaged tiara was inherited by Maria Pavlovna's only daughter, Grand Duchess Elena Vladimirovna, who had married into the Greek royal family and was known as Princess Nicholas of Greece and Denmark. Living in exile and needing funds, she decided to sell some of her mother's jewels in 1921. Queen Mary stepped in as a willing buyer. After purchasing the tiara, Mary immediately sent it to Gerard for essential repairs. She debuted the restored piece at the state opening of Parliament in 1924. That same year, Mary made a brilliant practical decision regarding the tiara's design. She commissioned Gerard to adapt the interlocking diamond circles so they could suspend a different set of stones. She chose 15 of the cabochon emeralds from her own family's collection, the very same Cambridge emeralds she had quietly bought back from her brother's mistress years earlier. The two rescued relics were now physically linked. Queen Mary wore this new emerald setting frequently, often paired with the Delhi Durbar parure. She eventually left the tiara to her granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, who wore it consistently until her final diplomatic reception in 2019. The physical process of changing the stones remained incredibly delicate throughout Elizabeth II's reign. Through a quiet purchase and a clever modification, Queen Mary ensured the survival of a Romanov masterpiece. But the Vladimir tiara was not the only treasure she managed to save from the Russian imperial family's scattered estate. Dowager Empress Maria Fyodorovna, born Princess Dagmar of Denmark, was the mother of Tsar Nicholas II and the beloved sister of Britain's Queen Alexandra. Before the revolution, she possessed one of the most valuable jewelry collections of her time, including a magnificent sapphire parure. When she finally fled Russia, she managed to escape with only a small fraction of her pieces. Among the items she kept close was a striking sapphire choker. The piece is highly versatile, consisting of 4 strands containing a total of 164 pearls, interspersed with 20 diamond-encrusted vertical bars. At the center sits a large sapphire surrounded by 2 rows of brilliant cut diamonds. The necklace was originally designed so it could be converted into 2 bracelets, while the central pendant could be detached and worn as a brooch. The Empress was photographed wearing this very choker with her sisters back in the 1890s. She also managed to save a highly sentimental piece, an oval cabochon sapphire brooch surrounded by 2 rows of diamonds, featuring a pear-shaped pearl pendant. This brooch had been a wedding gift to her in 1866 from her sister Alexandra and her brother-in-law, the future King Edward VII. When the Dowager Empress passed away in exile in Denmark in 1928, her daughters, Grand Duchess Xenia and Grand Duchess Olga, were left in a highly precarious financial situation. To fund their lives in exile, they had to sell several of their mother's remaining jewels. Queen Mary stepped in to purchase them. In 1930, she acquired the cabochon sapphire and pearl drop brooch. The following year, she purchased the sapphire choker via Hennel & Son in London. She wore the choker quite often, usually stacking it with strings of pearls and one of her sapphire tiaras. Queen Mary secured these historic pieces for the extended family, while the Grand Duchesses secured their immediate survival. The exchange of these diamonds and sapphires provided essential funds for their daily living expenses in a world where their empire had completely vanished. Queen Mary's acquisition of Russian sapphires continued, though the history of her next major purchase is rather tangled. In 1934, she acquired a massive jewel known today as the Russian sapphire cluster brooch. It is a spectacular 19th century piece featuring a large, faceted oval sapphire surrounded by a delicate layer of intricate gold filigree work and a halo of brilliant round diamonds. The exact provenance of this piece is heavily disputed. One version suggests it originated from the Imperial Russian court in the 1840s, was left behind in Russia during the Revolution, and was later sold by the Bolsheviks to a London jeweler. Another version suggests it has no Russian royal connection at all, originating instead from the estate of the wealthy British heiress, Baroness Angela Burdett Coutts. Whatever its true origin, the brooch became a cornerstone of the British royal collection. Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, adored it, wearing it faithfully for over half a century. She frequently chose it for daytime events like the Epsom Derby or palace garden parties. She even selected its bright blue hue for a very specific family occasion in December 1961, her first visit to Clarence House to meet her newest grandson, Princess Margaret's first child, Viscount Linley. Her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, inherited the brooch in 2002 and notably wore it for a private audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican in 2014. Today, it belongs to King Charles III, and Queen Camilla has worn it on several occasions, including the South Korean state visit to Britain in 2023. There's another Russian sapphire in the royal collection with a perfectly clear, uncontested history. It is a piece by the Moscow branch of Fabergé, featuring a gold geometric clasp set with a large square diamond and a distinctive sapphire cabochon cut into the shape of a pyramid. The design was quite typical for the firm, with an identical bracelet featuring an emerald cabochon listed in their 1899 price list. Dowager Empress Maria Fyodorovna selected this piece herself and sent it to London in 1893 as a wedding gift for the young Princess Mary of Teck. It originally arrived as the clasp on a gold curb chain bracelet, though the Queen later chose to wear the clasp vertically or horizontally as a brooch. This particular sapphire came with no dramatic rescue operation or disputed dealer records. It arrived simply as a direct, personal gift from one royal woman to another, given long before anyone could have known how much their world was about to change. Remember earlier in our conversation, I mentioned Queen Mary's purchases of Carl Fabergé's imperial eggs? Well, among her acquisitions from the Soviet state-run antiquariat in 1933 was a piece that completely broke from the traditional egg format. It is known as the basket of flowers egg, originally commissioned in 1901 by Tsar Nicholas II for Tsarina Alexandra Fyodorovna. It is essentially an egg-shaped silver-gilt vase holding a highly realistic bouquet of wild spring flowers, pansies, cornflowers, daisies, and oats set in green gold moss. The Tsarina, who adored botanical studies, kept it right in her study at the Winter Palace. But when Queen Mary acquired the piece, it carried the physical scars of the Revolution. The base, originally white enamel, had sustained such severe damage that it later had to be entirely re-enameled in blue. A recent microscopic examination by the Royal Collection even revealed empty metal prongs where several tiny pearls had simply been lost to the chaos of history. Of course, Queen Mary did not always have to negotiate these acquisitions entirely on her own. Like any woman who loves fine craftsmanship, she likely knew exactly how to drop a subtle hint to her husband. The very next year, in 1934, King George V purchased another Fabergé masterpiece from a London dealer, the 1914 mosaic egg, probably for Queen Mary's birthday. It was designed by a rare female Fabergé designer, Alma Peel, who found her inspiration simply by watching her mother-in-law doing petite point needlework by the fire. The result is a completely translucent mesh cage of platinum, individually cut by hand and tightly packed with rubies, sapphires, and green garnets to mimic tapestry work. You can look right through the gaps in the platinum mesh. The true weight of this object, however, lies in its hidden surprise. When the egg is opened, it reveals a delicate enameled medallion featuring the profile portraits of the Tsar and Tsarina's 5 children, surmounted by the Romanov imperial crown. It was the very last Easter egg made by Fabergé before the outbreak of the First World War brought an end to their era of luxury. Just 4 years after this egg was delivered, the entire family depicted on that small medallion would be executed. By securing this particular piece, King George V and Queen Mary preserved a frozen, pristine moment of a doomed family, keeping their memory safe within the British royal vaults. Queen Mary's focus extended beyond rescuing dynastic relics. She also valued the preservation of deep personal friendships. Jeanne Tufnell, who became the second Lady Mount Stephen, was widely described by the press as Queen Mary's most intimate friend. Their connection lasted for decades. In the spring of 1933, the Queen spent a week as a houseguest at Jeanne's country estate, Brandridge Forest in Sussex. On Friday, April 28th, Jeanne felt well enough to go to the door of her house to bid the Queen a fond farewell. She passed away suddenly from a heart attack just 4 days later. In her will, Lady Mount Stephen left her closest friend 2 distinct diamond necklaces. One featured old Brazilian stones with a square diamond in the center, and the other was a classic Riviere of 34 large, old-cut diamonds. Lady Jeanne clearly understood her royal friend's tastes. The path of the 34-stone Riviere eventually led to the next generation. Queen Mary passed the necklace down to her granddaughter, Princess Margaret, who wore it frequently for gala events, often pairing it with the towering Poltimore tiara. Following Princess Margaret's death in 2002, her children faced substantial estate taxes. They made the difficult decision to auction several of her jewels in 2006, including the Lady Mount Stephen Riviere. The historic necklace sold at Christie's for over $1.8 million, making it the most expensive jewelry item in the sale. It is always a little poignant to see a piece with such deep personal ties to Queen Mary leave the royal vaults and pass into private hands. When we look back at the whispers of the aristocracy and the plot lines of period dramas like Downton Abbey, the label of a light-fingered kleptomaniac simply falls flat. Queen Mary acted with deliberate, uncompromising intent. She leveraged her position and her personal finances to reclaim scattered heirlooms and provide quiet financial lifelines to exiled relatives. The results of her relentless collecting are highly visible today. Queen Camilla frequently wears the Russian sapphire cluster brooch and recently debuted the Cambridge Emerald cluster brooch at Royal Ascot. The Princess Royal faithfully wears Empress Maria Fyodorovna's sapphire and pearl choker. The Teck crescent tiara, pieced together from her mother's heritage, remains completely safe within the family collection. Princess Mary of Teck began her life in a family constantly plagued by debt, moving across Europe to escape creditors. She understood firsthand exactly how quickly royal status and material security could vanish. She gathered a mosaic of diamonds, emeralds, and sapphires from the wreckage of gambling debts, secret affairs, and fallen empires, securing them permanently within the British royal collection. If you found this journey through the royal archives as fascinating as I did, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to ensure you don't miss our next story. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. These jewels may be silent, but their stories are certainly not. They will not fade as long as we keep telling them.